Welcome to Beyond the Comfort Zone Talking Shit with KING-KAMBUF.
And thank you for joining us. We're about to get into one of the most visionary strategic blueprints we've seen yet from the services of KING-KAMBUF PS Architecture Design Studios.
Today we are analyzing a document that, honestly, it feels like a full-scale strategic pivot. It completely changes the conversation around national development.
It really does.
We are cracking open the KAMBUF National Building Design Command Brief. This one landed at 8 a.m. sharp on Saturday, December 6, 2025.
And the studio theme for today really says it all. It's called Circular Materials and Waste-to-Resource City Regions, Transforming Waste into Sovereign Materials for KAMBUF-Built Environments.
That is a mouthful.
It is, but every word counts. And just for clarity, when we say KAMBUF, we're talking about that whole strategic vision, right? The collective design initiatives to build these resilient, integrated, modern settlements for African and diaspora communities.
Right, and it makes so much sense, the timing of this. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on the show talking about the foundational stuff, the scarcities, water, energy, land.
The basics.
The absolute basics. The focus was always, how do you secure supply? But this brief, it almost feels like it's saying, okay, we've got the concepts for that handled.
We've moved past that problem.
Exactly. Now we have to solve the challenge of waste and materials. It's a huge strategic evolution. It acknowledges that with rapid urbanization, with consumption comes a whole new set of problems.
Or, as the brief argues, a whole new set of opportunities.
Yeah.
The core mission is, it's revolutionary, but it's also incredibly simple. It's to fundamentally reconceive every single waste stream you can imagine.
Every single one.
Everything. We're talking organic garbage, food scraps from markets, the plastic pollution choking the coastlines, all the construction debris from new builds, and the really complex stuff like e-waste.
Okay.
And under this strategy, none of that is considered garbage anymore. Not a single piece. It's all reclassified. It's now raw, sovereign resource.
Sovereign resource. I like that framing.
And it's destined for a specific purpose. To be used in building, in industry, and in agriculture, right across the board in all the KAMBUF city-states, and, importantly, the diaspora hubs, too.
So it's like the last mission was about finding fresh water, and this mission is about mining clean waste.
Yeah.
What's the end game? This sounds like it goes way beyond just, a municipal cleanup program.
Oh, way beyond. It's not about cleanup. It's about creation. The mission really has three interconnected goals. First, and this is the most immediate, is to dramatically reduce the severe environmental burden. I mean, you have waste accumulating at a staggering rate in African and diaspora communities, which, let's be honest, have often been the dumping ground for the rest of the world's refuse.
Right, the environmental justice angle.
That's number one. Number two is to build local material sovereignty. The goal is to slash the reliance on imported virgin materials, things like cement, aggregate, structural steel, all of which are expensive and have volatile supply chains.
So you're replacing imports with something you generate internally.
Precisely. And the third goal is to embed truly regenerative, circular livelihoods. This means creating jobs, developing new skills, building local supply chains that are part of every single settlement, no matter the scale. They're engineering cycles of sustainable economic value, not cycles of environmental damage.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I was looking at the Master Challenge preview in the brief, and it makes one thing incredibly clear. This is not about funding a single technology.
No, not at all.
It's asking the designers to create the delivery mechanisms.
And that is the absolute critical distinction here. This isn't a tech brief, even though it involves a lot of technology. It's a complex systems brief.
That's systems brief.
Yes. The challenge demands this integrated planning for how, for instance, private and public investment is going to flow. How do you rewrite procurement policies so that they actually favor recycled materials over virgin ones?
Which is a huge bureaucratic lift.
Huge. And then how is local governance integrated into the day-to-day reality of this? And maybe most importantly, how do you finance community action so that it's the community itself transforming waste into value?
And it has to work everywhere.
It has to work everywhere, across incredibly diverse contexts. You're talking about dense, informal settlements in a megacity like Lagos, and then smaller, more high-tech material hubs in the U.S. or the Caribbean.
So you're designing the economic engine, the social accountability engine, just as much as you're designing the actual, physical processing plant.
That's the master challenge. The machine is social and financial, not just mechanical.
Okay, so if that's the scope, let's dive into section one. This is the strategic pivot, waste as sovereign wealth. We often talk about waste as a nuisance, an environmental problem, but this brief just reframes it completely. It's a core sovereignty and justice issue.
And you have to understand it through that lens, or the whole commitment doesn't make sense. Section 5 of the brief, it just lays out the justification in really stark terms.
And the problem is acute.
It's beyond acute. African and diaspora cities are just seeing this explosion in population and consumption. And that directly translates to an explosion in waste. We're talking mountains of plastic that can't be recycled easily, more and more hazardous e-waste from consumer electronics, and a constant stream of construction debris from all the urbanization.
And the infrastructure just isn't there to handle it.
It's completely overwhelmed. Formal, regulated, large-scale recycling infrastructure is, it's woefully limited or non-existent in many places.
And a result of that, it's not some abstract pollution number. It has real, immediate human costs, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This lack of formal infrastructure, it leads to waste just accumulating. It damages ecosystems. You get severe pollution in coastal zones, in rivers, in the groundwater.
And it's concentrated in specific communities.
And that's the crucial point. The environmental and health damage is almost entirely concentrated in low-income communities and informal settlements. When waste handling is unregulated, what happens? People burn it or gets dumped in toxic ways. So it becomes an environmental justice crisis before it's anything else.
But this is where the pivot happens. Where conventional thinking sees a crisis, a cleanup cost, the KING-KAMBUF strategy sees a massive economic opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's framed by these, global circular economy ideas.
That's the pivot, exactly. These global frameworks are increasingly saying, look, waste as resource is a sustainable countermodel. It's an alternative to the linear extractive economies that have, frankly, dominated global trade for centuries.
So you take from the earth, you make something, you use it, you throw it away. That's linear.
That's linear. And this briefing argues that if you can intercept those waste streams consistently, before they become a hazard, they become reliable local supplies.
Supplies of what specifically?
Of building materials, first and foremost. But also renewable energy through things like biogas, essential soil fertility from compost and biochar, and of course, a steady, high-volume source of economic livelihood. It literally lets you replace expensive imports with your own internal local production. You're internalizing the entire material economy.
Which brings us right back to that core KING-KAMBUF vision, sovereignty and self-reliance. This isn't just about, reducing your carbon footprint to feel good. This is a structural anti-dependence strategy.
100%. By embedding these waste-to-resource systems early into every single layer of city and regional planning, the goal is to build infrastructure that is resilient, low carbon, and equitable. Infrastructure that can actually weather shocks to the global supply chain.
Because you're not waiting for a ship to arrive with cement.
Exactly. The moment you start making your own construction materials from local recycled plastic or from crushed, reclaimed concrete from a demolition site, you've just reduced your financial and logistical dependence on international markets for aggregates, for cement, for specialized plastics. That is a direct, tangible path to material sovereignty.
And you create jobs in the process.
And you generate this vast, decentralized network of green jobs that stay local. They can't be outsourced.
If you look at the language in the closing directive, that's section 6. It's really powerful. It's almost poetic in how it asserts this value.
Yeah.
It's framing the ethical mandate for the whole thing.
It really is. The directive is the philosophical capstone, the moral imperative. It states, and it's unequivocal, waste is not refuse. Waste is resource. That one line changes everything.
It transforms how you even perceive the stuff on the street.
It does. It calls every bottle, every scrap of metal, every broken brick, every discarded electronic shell, part of the raw wealth of our people. This is about reclamation, both spiritual and material.
That framing elevates the act of, say, sorting plastic from just a simple cleanup job to a national building effort. And the scope of this circular justice, as they call it, is huge.
It's massive. The ultimate goal is circular justice. And what that means is the idea that the nation has to be built with reclaimed value, and that this reclamation must proactively, intentionally benefit the very communities that have historically borne the disproportionate burden of global consumption.
And it's not just one city or one country.
No, the scope is clear. It says From Lagos to Kingston, Durban to New York, we close the loop. That is a direct mandate to integrate African and diaspora economies through these shared responsible material flows. This isn't just about self-reliance, it's restorative justice enacted through infrastructure.
So if Section 1 was the philosophical why, the sovereignty argument, then Section 2 gets into the operational how, the really hard part, which is the realities of financing and delivering this kind of pivot.
Right.
So moving into Section 2, the command brief's rotating master challenge for this period is focused strictly on procurement, finance, and delivery.
And this is the reality check. This is where the beautiful vision meets the messy reality of implementation.
Right.
Because you can have the best sorting technology in the world, the most advanced plastic-to-block extruder, but if you can't finance a consistent collection system to feed it, it's useless.
Or if the engineers don't trust the final product.
Exactly. If you can't ensure reliable quality control that a structural engineer will sign off on, the whole effort just collapses back into what it was before. Informal, often toxic, and unreliable. The task here is to design that durable financial and social engine that actually powers the circular economy for the long term.
So we're really asking three huge interconnected questions here about implementation. Let's start with the supply side. How is all this waste collected and processed consistently, especially across such varied urban and rural places?
Consistency is, without a doubt, the single biggest technical hurdle. In so many of these rapidly urbanized places, the formal municipal waste collection is, well, it's weak, or it doesn't exist at all in some areas.
And that void is filled by the informal sector.
It's filled by this incredibly active, but often unregulated, informal economy of waste pickers and traders. So the design has to integrate or formalize these existing networks. You can't just replace them.
How do you do that?
Often through things like community co-ops. But you have to ensure worker safety, you have to guarantee fair wages, and most importantly, you have to build in reliability. And the processing itself has to be adaptable. A machine that works for dense urban market waste might not work for scattered rural collection. It all has to be modular.
Okay, question 2. This is the economic heart of the whole plan. How are these incredibly complex, dispersed waste-to-value supply chains actually financed and governed for the long haul?
Yeah, this is the billion-dollar question. Literally, you're talking about massive upfront capital for the equipment, the crushers, the digesters, the kilns. But that's just the start. You also need continuous, secure operational funding.
For labor, for logistics.
For labor, for the trucks, for quality control, for maintenance. The financing model has to be really innovative. It can't just be one thing. It has to be a blend of traditional municipal budgets, but also climate bonds, specific green or blue bonds for coastal projects.
And private investment.
Social impact investment, absolutely. And community-owned co-ops that actually capture and then reinvest the value that they create.
And the governance piece.
The governance is the framework that holds it all together. It ensures you're complying with regulations, it enforces fair labor standards, and critically, it guarantees the long-term maintenance and replacement of all this specialized equipment. This cannot be something that depends on who wins the next election. It has to be institutionalized.
Okay, and the third big question is about that geographic diversity. How do you make investment, procurement, and community collection all work together across the wildly different contexts of African cities and diaspora hubs? That's a huge logistical and regulatory jump.
It is. And it means you absolutely cannot have a one-size-fits-all solution. The systems have to be flexible, they have to be modular. A collection system for an informal settlement in Lagos, which might rely on push carts and small vehicles, is going to look completely different from a transcontinental shipping mechanism that starts in a high-tech material hub on the U.S. East Coast.
Procurement has to change, too.
Procurement has to be rewritten to prioritize local manufacturing of the tools, the molds, the basic components for these systems. And the investment has to be patient. It has to recognize the immense social and material sovereignty returns, not just the pure financial ones.
So to manage all this complexity, the brief gives a very clear roadmap for how to scale up. It's a 3-phasing model, and it's common to all 10 of the schemes we're about to get into.
Yes, and this is smart. It's designed to avoid the catastrophic failure of trying to do too much too quickly. It's a methodical stress test system.
So phase 1 is the pilot.
Right. This is all about establishing the foundational collection networks, getting the first small-scale processing plants up and running. This is your testing ground. You're testing the collection methods, you're figuring out the material sorting protocols, and you're getting the proof of concept for the technology. You're just proving that it's feasible locally.
Then if that works, you move into phase 2, which is scaling.
And this is where the volume increases dramatically. Production scales up. You start to see community reuse and construction projects actually using the new materials. Component production stabilizes and becomes reliable. The focus here shifts from just proving the concept to actually achieving economic viability and meeting real, measurable, local demand for materials.
And finally, phase 3, integration. What does that mean beyond just being operational?
Integration is the crucial final goal. It means, yes, the full supply chain is active, regional distribution is happening, but most importantly, the maintenance protocols, the mandatory quality control standards, and the institutional integration are all finalized.
What does institutional integration look like?
It means it's written into city building policy. It's embedded in the regulatory frameworks. The system is no longer a project. It's a permanent, legislated, and funded piece of the nation's core infrastructure. This is the phase where you permanently mitigate the political risk. It's just how things are done now.
All right, this is where it gets really, really interesting. Let's dive into section 3, the 10 design schemes. These are the practical blueprints, the portfolio drills for building this sovereign wealth, and they're grouped by the type of material they're targeting. We need to get into the mechanics here.
And these 10 schemes are fantastic because they show the multi-scalar approach you need. They range from a single specialized processing hub all the way up to a continental policy framework. It's the tactical deployment of that sovereignty vision we were talking about.
Okay, let's start with A, coastal and plastic transformation. This is Scheme 1, Coastal Ghana. Plastic waste recycling and coastal construction materials plant, and it's targeted at port and fishing communities.
The objective here is really direct, and it solves two problems at once. First, you intercept that relentless flow of plastic pollution and marine debris that's just devastating the West African coasts. And second, you convert that exact waste into affordable, locally produced construction blocks and pavers.
So you're addressing coastal cleanup and the housing shortage at the same time.
Exactly, a classic 2-for-1.
The deliverables required for this are extremely specific. They demand detailed drawings of the recycled plastic block production line molding station at a 1.100 scale. Why so much detail on just that one piece of equipment?
Because that's where these projects succeed or fail. The biggest engineering challenge in using mixed consumer plastic for construction isn't getting enough of it. It's ensuring the quality of the final product.
So it's not just melting plastic and pouring it in a mold?
Not at all. You need to understand the precise thermal consistency required for melting, molding, and then cooling that plastic. If you heat it unevenly, or if there are contaminants in the mix, what you get is a block that's porous, brittle, and structurally completely unreliable. Worse than useless dangerous. So the 1.100 scale forces the designers to really define the mechanics of the material input, the exact temperature controls, the pressure, the curing process, to guarantee that the output is high quality and, above all, safe.
The implementation notes for this scheme specifically mention getting buy-in from the Port Authority and local fishing communities. That points to the social complexity.
That's the governance layer sitting on top of the technology. You need the Port Authority's permission to intercept the marine debris and to use port logistics. But the consistent supply of the land-based plastic waste, that often relies on the local fishing communities.
Because they're the ones most affected.
They're the ones most affected by the pollution, so they have the most incentive. They're the ones who will operate the primary collection co-ops. And the financing has to reflect that. It relies on specific climate and plastic pollution grants that are designed to fund these exact kinds of public-private community partnerships.
And the cautionary tale here is all about consistency and quality. It says that if this fails, it's often because the supply is either inconsistent or it's contaminated.
It's the classic garbage in, garbage out problem. These plastic-to-material initiatives around the world often collapse because they can't manage the upstream logistics. Success hinges completely on robust collection and, crucially, on the source communities being committed to sorting the plastic cleanly at the point of origin. You need to ensure the quality of that polymer feedstock is high enough to make a reliable building material.
Okay, let's move on to Group B, urban salvage and e-waste processing. We've got two schemes here that focus on formalizing these existing salvage economies. Let's start with Scheme 2 in the Lagos region, informal settlement e-waste plus construction debris processing hub.
This one is, it's really a social intervention disguised as an environmental policy. The context here is these dense, peri-urban, informal areas where massive salvage economies are already thriving. The goal isn't to replace them.
It's to formalize.
It's to formalize them, give them dignity, and make them safe.
So the core challenge is to leverage that existing grassroots circularity people are already reusing e-waste components, salvaging scrap metal, crushing old bricks and channel that to lower the cost of affordable housing projects. And in the process, you reduce the waste load on the city.
Right, and the deliverables for this scheme show a really ambitious full-service vision. They want a comprehensive site plan for a hub that has designated sorting zones, a proper salvage material store like a marketplace for reused goods, and then specialized small-scale manufacturing shops for things like carpentry and metalwork.
So you're turning what might be an informal dump site into a regulated center for production and commerce.
Exactly. A place where labor is protected and skilled, not just exploited.
But the precedent insight confirms something important. While the informal economy shows the potential, the danger is also magnified in this exact setting.
The primary risk, and it's a huge one, is health and safety. Informal e-waste processing often involves incredibly toxic practices. People burning plastic casings and circuit boards in the open air to recover tiny amounts of copper and gold.
Which leads to terrible health outcomes.
Terrible. Toxic smoke exposure, heavy metal poisoning, unsafe working conditions for thousands of people, including children. The brief is really clear on this. Without strict regulation and safe handling protocols, especially for things like lead, mercury, and cadmium in e-waste, you risk producing housing components that are not just substandard, but actively toxic.
So training is non-negotiable.
Training is mandatory. Safe dismantling, using the right tools, having proper ventilation, it's all part of the design challenge.
Now let's look at the diaspora angle on this. That's Scheme 5, Electronic Waste, E-Waste Recovery and Materials Reclamation Center in a U.S. Caribbean hub. This takes the same problem but situates it in a totally different context.
Right. This is about turning a burden into a localized, high-value service abroad. It targets the immense e-waste burden that exists outside the continent, specifically in Afro-diaspora communities in the U.S. or the Caribbean, which often don't have access to specialized ethical recycling facilities themselves.
So what's the goal here?
It's twofold. First, recover the high-value metals and specialized polymers that would otherwise just end up in Western landfills. And second, use that process to generate local, circular economy jobs and supply high-quality recycled materials for community projects right there.
The deliverables for this one demand a detailed workflow diagram. It has to show the entire process, from collection right through to clean material extraction. And again, specific drawings of safe processing workstations with ventilation and safety features. The technical detail is a safeguard.
It is, because the regulatory environment in the U.S. or the Caribbean is often much stricter than on the continent, so the need for precision is amplified. The finance strategy also reflects that context. It relies heavily on environmental justice grants and social enterprise investors who will demand a lot of social impact reporting.
And it's not just about processing.
No, the inclusion of vocational training rooms and a community reuse and resale outlet really emphasizes skill transfer and sustained economic empowerment. You're turning what was toxic waste management into a source of high-tech skills for the community.
Okay, shifting gears now to see organic waste in biomaterials. This gets us into soil, food, and energy sovereignty. Scheme 3 is South Africa, citywide organic waste to compost, plus biogas, plus urban farming network. This feels like a textbook closed-loop model.
It's the definitive closed-loop model for dense urban areas, and it's particularly targeted at townships. The challenge is to take the massive volume of urban organic waste from households, from large markets, and transform it into two valuable products: high-quality compost and biogas.
And the benefits are immediate.
Immediate. You reduce the load on landfills, which lowers methane emissions, and methane is a really potent greenhouse gas. And you provide both renewable energy and vital soil amendments directly to urban farms. It's a direct response to food insecurity.
The deliverables here include a network map that has to show the whole cycle at a huge scale, the collection zones, the location of the compost and biogas plants, and, critically, the distribution paths for both the energy and the fertilizer to the farms and low-income households.
Right. And the engineering details have to be there too. The specifics of the anaerobic digester, how the compost piles are managed, the design of the biogas burners or generators. The ESG metrics are super important here because they are directly climate-facing. You can measure the reduction in methane emissions, you can measure food security improvements through better soil, and you can track urban greening metrics.
So what's the weak point for these kinds of organic waste programs? The cautionary tale seems to point to a few key things.
Yeah, it's what I call the 3 C's: collection, contamination, and cost. These programs often fail because the collection is inconsistent. If the trucks don't run on time, people lose faith. Or the contamination is too high, people throwing plastics and glass in with the organic waste, which can ruin a whole batch of compost or jam a digester.
And the cost.
And most commonly, the operational costs and the maintenance end up being more than the revenue you can generate. Digesters are complex machines. They need a constant clean feedstock, and they need skilled maintenance. This just underscores the absolute need for robust, long-term management and deep community ownership. The local co-ops have to feel responsible and capable of doing the maintenance themselves.
Okay, next up is Scheme 8, which targets East Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, a regional bio-waste to building material and fertilizer network. This one broadens the type of waste being used to include agricultural residues.
This scheme is a great evolution of the last one. It moves beyond just municipal food waste to incorporate the huge volumes of agricultural waste you find in rural areas. Things like crop residues, waste from milling, animal manure, and it uses them to create even higher value, more specialized outputs.
So we're not just making compost here.
No, we're talking about high-grade compost, yes, but also biochar, and then using that biochar to create stabilized bricks and compressed earth blocks for construction.
So you're producing genuine, low-carbon building materials from farm waste.
Exactly.
Oh.
And the deliverable reflects that. It's a detailed drawing of this very specific material production line, showing the composting area, the biochar kiln, and the block making and curing stations. The potential impact is exponential.
In what ways?
You get massive improvements in soil fertility.
Yeah.
You get significant carbon sequestration because the biochar locks carbon into the building materials in the soil for centuries. You reduce deforestation because you're offering an alternative to traditional fired bricks, which use a lot of wood. And you get a real uplift for the rural economy by creating value from agricultural byproducts that were previously just burned or left to rot.
Is there a catch?
The catch, as always, is quality control. Without very strict, standardized mixtures and processes, the resulting biomaterials can be chemically inconsistent or structurally weak. And if that happens, builders won't adopt them, and the whole system fails.
All right, let's look at deconstruction and demolition waste, CDW. This is Scheme 4 in Kenya, Nairobi, or the Rift Valley region. As these African cities are booming, the sheer volume of concrete and brick waste is becoming a crisis in itself.
CDW is a massive, massive logistical and volume problem in a place like Nairobi that's urbanizing so quickly.
Yeah.
The challenge is, what do you do with this huge stream of broken concrete, bricks, masonry, and metal?
And the answer is?
You manage it. You recycle it locally to produce high-quality reclaimed aggregates, recycled rebar, and you feed those materials directly back into affordable housing projects. This takes huge pressure off virgin aggregate mines and quarries, and it slashes transport costs because your source material is right there in the city.
The required outputs are a citywide waste material flow diagram, and again, those detailed drawings, the recycled aggregate brick production line, the crushing, the sorting, the reforming, the quality control. This seems like the moment to talk about structural risk. You know, doesn't a strategy like this carry a huge political risk and a human risk? I mean, if you move too fast on recycled materials and something goes wrong, poor quality control leads to a structural failure. That could undermine the entire sovereignty narrative. It would create deep distrust in these new materials. How does the brief suggest mitigating that political fallout, not just the engineering risk?
That is the absolute most critical challenge for this particular scheme. And the cautionary tale in the brief points directly to it. Lack of regulatory oversight and poor quality control can lead to unsafe materials, structural failures, or just substandard housing.
So how do you prevent that?
To mitigate that political risk, the brief mandates that these recycled materials must meet, or in some cases, exceed the existing national building codes, and that requires rigorous, independent technical verification.
So you need labs, you need testing.
You need dedicated testing labs. And they have to be looking at very specific things like the porosity of the new concrete, the sulfate content in the recycled aggregates, which can cause disastrous structural swelling over time, and the consistent grading of the reclaimed sand and gravel. This isn't just about saving money, it is about engineering public trust.
So you need institutional buy-in.
This scheme, more than any other, needs established standards, rigorous testing protocols, and powerful institutional backing from, say, the Ministry of Works to certify and publicly endorse the materials. That's how you insulate the program from political failure if, God forbid, something does go wrong. You have to be able to prove the materials themselves are safe.
Okay, now we're getting into what might be the most complex and ambitious part of this whole brief, e-systemic and cross-border frameworks. These last three schemes, 6, 9, and 10, they don't deal with a single material type. They're about governing the flow and the policy of materials across huge distances. Let's start with Scheme 6, West Africa Regional Waste Aggregation and Materials Redistribution Network.
This is just a monumental regional logistics puzzle. It covers multiple adjacent countries. You're talking Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and others. The aim here is to think at a continental scale. It's about coordinating the collection of waste, processing it into standardized materials, and then distributing those materials across borders to meet regional construction needs, rather than having everything stuck in fragmented national markets.
The implementation notes for this one really reveal the massive regulatory hurdle. It says governance and permitting has to come from national governments, regional bodies like ECOWAS, that's the Economic Community of West African States, and all the various municipal agencies all at the same time. That sounds like a recipe for bureaucratic warfare.
It is the ultimate test of regional cooperation, and the financing has to match that scale. It would have to use blended regional development funds and specific green or blue bonds to acknowledge the huge capital outlay you'd need for cross-border logistics, for customs harmonization, for quality infrastructure at every border.
And the cautionary tale is pretty blunt.
It's very strong. It says cross-border trade introduces immense regulatory hurdles, complex logistics, and potential quality control breakdowns. Without a robust, mutually recognized system of governance and standardization, your materials either become substandard or they just get stuck at a border for 6 months, which makes the whole supply chain unreliable.
So the materials themselves have to be standardized.
They have to be standardized to the point where they are easily tradable commodities across the entire region. So you're creating a single shared material economy.
Okay, let's move to what is maybe the most provocative and I think psychologically significant concept in the whole brief. Scheme 9, the Transcontinental Diaspora Supply Chain. The subtitle is Recycled Made in Diaspora Materials for African Infrastructure. This is the reverse material flow.
Yeah, this one is a game changer. It leverages the advanced waste processing capacity that often exists in diaspora hubs in the Americas or Europe, which is often driven by their own strict environmental laws. And it uses that capacity to supply certified, high-quality recycled materials, plastics, metals, even prefabricated modular building kits, back to infrastructure projects on the African continent.
Wait, hang on. So instead of African countries having to deal with the global flow of toxic waste exports coming in, we're talking about reversing that entire colonial material flow, making the diaspora's consumption a valuable asset for the continent.
That is the profound psychological and economic pivot. Precisely. It turns the diaspora from just being a source of financial remittances into a source of physical, sovereign material wealth.
That's a huge idea.
It's massive. And the deliverables show how complex it is. They require a global network diagram showing the flow of materials, the shipping routes, and all the critical details of packaging, containerization standards, and the complex customs compliance you'd need. This is less about architecture and more about high-level logistics and trade policy design.
And the compliance issues must be staggering, especially given the history of global waste dumping. You have to navigate international shipping laws, customs, and all these strict waste export regulations.
Absolutely. The biggest single hurdle is something called the Basel Convention. It's an international treaty that governs how hazardous waste moves around the world, and it was specifically designed to stop wealthy northern countries from dumping their trash on the global south.
So how do you get around that?
You don't get around it, you meet it head on. This scheme requires proving, with exhaustive certification and testing, that the material being shipped is a high-quality, standardized, non-hazardous resource, not refuse, before it can cross any international border. And the financing, crucially, relies on diaspora investment funds and remittance-linked mechanisms. So it directly links the commitment and the capital of the diaspora to the physical act of building the nation. And that brings us to the apex, Scheme 10. Pan-African Circular Materials and Waste Sovereignty Framework. This is the big one. This is the policy scheme, the operating system that's intended to govern the entire continent's ambitions in this space. This is the meta-level challenge. This is the scheme that ensures that Schemes 1 through 9 can actually function sustainably and legally in the long run. It's about designing the institutional, the financial, the regulatory, and the infrastructural systems that are necessary to support all 9 of the preceding schemes. It's about transforming Africa's fragmented waste streams into consistent, reliable, continent-wide resource flows for construction, for agro-industry, and for manufacturing.
And the key deliverables here, they're not drawings of buildings, they're policy documents. An outline of the policy and regulatory framework, so standards for certification, for trade, health safeguards, and the governance and maintenance model, which gets into community co-ops and regional authorities. This is the infrastructure of trust.
It is the framework that ensures quality control, consistency, and compliance at a continental scale. And the precedent studies here are really revealing. While international analysts see a framework like this as the critical lever for African material sovereignty, past continental-level proposals have failed.
Why did they fail?
They failed for a predictable set of reasons: weak governance, insufficient or unreliable financing, a total lack of standardization between countries, and often resistance from very established informal and sometimes even illicit sectors who benefit from the status quo. So this scheme has to design solutions that anticipate and mitigate all of those institutional failures before they even begin. Strong, centralized institutional design that still respects decentralized local operation is absolutely paramount.
Okay, let's move into the final part of the brief, Section 4. Operationalizing the circular vision. This is where the ambition meets the blueprint, where the rubber meets the road. The action instructions in this section mandate just a massive amount of technical detail, even for the smaller scale schemes.
They really do. The architects, engineers, and planners who get this brief are instructed to produce two main things. First, a concept block, which is your network diagrams, your metric definitions. But second, and more importantly, a highly specific drawing and detail block. This brief is not satisfied with just big ideas. It demands tangible, buildable, and accountable solutions.
Tell us a bit more about the technical requirements for that drawing block. Why this obsession with things like safety and quality control zones on the actual drawings?
The instructions are so rigorous because they're designed to do one thing: unlock investor confidence. Every single plan, whether it's a site layout for the composting plant in Scheme 3 or the e-waste dismantling hub in Scheme 5, has to include detailed annotations on the layout of the processing equipment, yes, but also designated safety zones and sophisticated ventilation systems to protect the workers.
And material flow.
Clearly defined material flows, storage logistics, and, this is the critical part, dedicated quality control zones and testing labs. For instance, in Scheme 4 for Kenya, the one with construction debris, they have to detail the crushing and sorting line, but they also have to detail the specific equipment that will be used for structural testing to prove that the materials meet those high standards we talked about.
So these detailed technical requirements, they're basically acting as the due diligence documentation before a single shovel even hits the ground.
That's a perfect way to put it. They are the evidence that this is a serious long-term infrastructure investment, not just a pilot project.
They are the data-driven language you need to unlock that large-scale climate and infrastructure financing from global partners and regional development banks.
Precisely. If you can show a rigorous QA/QC process right there on a drawing, you have fundamentally mitigated the risk of failure, and that's what secures the investment.
And the final piece of this operational puzzle is defining what success actually looks like through the mandated ESG and circular economy metrics template.
Because measurement is the key to accountability. It's the key to proving that you're actually achieving the sovereignty gains you promised. If you can't quantify the specific benefit, you can't secure continued investment, and you can't demonstrate strategic success.
And the metrics are comprehensive.
They are. They combine volume, economic, and social impact. So you have to track tons of waste diverted from landfill per year, the specific volume of materials produced, so cubic meters of aggregate, kilotons of biochar, and a measurable reduction in the demand for virgin materials or reduction in import dependence.
And the social and climate impact metrics are just as important as the raw material output numbers.
They're given equal weight. That means tracking the number of jobs created and the community livelihood uplift. It means quantifying the carbon emissions you've avoided, for example, by diverting organic waste from methane-emitting landfills. It means environmental impact reduction metrics, like cleaner coastlines or less toxic runoff.
And there's one last one.
And a final critical metric.
Yeah.
The improvement in housing affordability that's been enabled by using these cheaper, locally sourced, recycled materials. These metrics, taken together, are the language of successful delivery. They are the proof of resource sovereignty.
So to try and synthesize everything we've covered today, this command brief, it really does represent a tectonic shift in thinking. We have moved completely away from just addressing basic supply scarcity.
Right, from water and energy.
To strategically reclaiming and repositioning domestic and even diaspora waste streams as the absolute foundation of future wealth.
And those 10 schemes, they show this incredibly complex, multi-scale, and just breathtakingly ambitious approach. You have everything from optimizing a single safe e-waste dismantling station in a diaspora hub, all the way up to formulating that continental scale policy framework in Scheme 10 that has to govern trade, finance, and quality control across multiple nations and economic blocs. This is infrastructure planning at a geopolitical scale.
And the core philosophy that runs through it all is what they call circular justice.
It's not just an environmental optimization project, it's an economic and a moral declaration. It's designed to build material sovereignty by empowering local workers, by formalizing these grassroots economies, and by actively, intentionally reducing the environmental burden in the communities that have historically suffered the most from these global, linear, extractive models.
It turns a liability trash into a sovereign asset that's controlled by the people.
That's the goal.
And as you reflect on all this, what stands out to you about that common thread, the cautionary tales, that were included in almost every single one of those 10 schemes? Because the brief is remarkably transparent about where these kinds of projects typically fail.
It's the governance fragility. That's the thread. The brief identifies the same failure points again and again: inconsistency of supply, poor quality control that leads to structural failures, and a lack of deep institutional and community buy-in. Those are the primary reasons these projects have failed in the past.
So it's not the technology.
The technology and even the initial finance, while they're challenging, they're largely solvable problems, especially given this level of ambition. The real persistent risk is not technical. It's the human layer, the political layer, the institutional layer. It's the ability to maintain these complex systems across political transitions and to guarantee material quality for decades to come.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on as you digest this massive blueprint. If the goal, as the directive states, is truly self-reliance and sovereignty, then the success of this entire ambitious structure seems to hinge less on the sophistication of the crushing equipment or the biogas digester, and more on something that is far, far harder to engineer.
And that is?
Robust, long-term, community-owned governance and institutional accountability. If, as that directive so powerfully states, waste is resource and waste is wealth, then the ultimate question becomes who controls the keys to that bank? And how do you build a transparent, resilient system that ensures that control remains with the community and not with powerful political or commercial interests for generations to come?